We often hear that language is like a window into the world of its speakers.
Yeah,
That the vocabulary a culture develops tells you a lot about what's important to them.
that's a great way to put it. It's not just random noise, you know? A language reflects how people interact with everything around them, their world, their society.
Well, this deep dive really gets into that. We're looking at this fascinating piece of research. Scientists basically computationally analyzed a huge amount of linguistic data.
Yeah, something like 616 languages.
Exactly, 616 languages and over 1,500 bilingual dictionaries.
Wow.
All to really try and nail down those connections between a language and specific concepts. And this wasn't just, some small thing. It was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences.
Right, which tells you it's a pretty serious data-heavy approach. Not just anecdotes, they used computational methods on this massive scale.
Something no single person could really do.
Definitely not. Spotting patterns across that much data requires computers.
So, for you listening, maybe you want to get the key info quickly, but still get the depth. This is perfect.
Right.
We're boiling down the big insights, the surprises from this study.
Without getting lost in all the technical weeds.
Exactly.
And the method was quite clever, really. They looked at how often words tied to certain ideas, certain concepts, showed up in these dictionaries. They had word counts, basically.
So they can see which languages had like a lot of words for horses or snow or whatever.
These semantic fields, as linguists might call them, groups of related words.
Okay. So our goal today, our mission for this deep dive, is to unpack some of the most interesting links they found. Some stuff that might even, challenge what you thought you knew.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay.
So, to start, the study did back up a lot of the classic examples, the ones you often hear about.
Right, the sort of textbook cases, like Mongolia having tons of words about horses.
Exactly that. Makes perfect sense. Given their nomadic history, horses were central. And, the Maori language having many words for different types of ferns again, reflecting the ecology of New Zealand.
And Japanese in taste. I think I've heard that one too.
That's another one. A very nuanced vocabulary for taste, suggesting perhaps the cultural importance of food there.
Then there were other pretty logical ones confirmed too, right? Like German and beer.
Yeah, that one probably doesn't surprise many people.
No.
And Fijian having a rich vocabulary related to fish. Totally understandable for an island nation.
Makes sense.
And this builds on earlier work, too, like Paul Zinsley's work on Swiss German, finding all those incredibly specific words for mountains and alpine features.
Oh, right.
This study sort of provides a wider computational look, confirming these kinds of links linguists have noticed for ages.
And it wasn't just about the physical environment either, was it? Didn't they confirm Hindi having lots of words related to love?
It did, yes. Hinting maybe at a cultural focus on relationships, emotions, and Japanese, again, showing up with words around obligation and duty.
Which seems to fit with common perceptions of Japanese societal values.
Right, but the key thing here is the scale. Finding statistical support across hundreds of languages really strengthens the idea that language and culture are deeply intertwined.
Okay, but here's where I thought it got really interesting. The study tackled that whole debate about Inuit languages and words for snow.
Ah, yes, the famous or infamous Great Eskimo vocabulary hoax.
Exactly. It's been argued about for decades. People saying it's a myth, an exaggeration.
A kind of linguistic urban legend, often dismissed.
But this study, well, it seems to push back against that dismissal, doesn't it?
It really does. The results were pretty striking. They found that Eastern Canadian Inuktitut actually came out #1 for the concept snow.
#1 out of all 616 languages.
Top of the list, which is, quite a finding.
And it wasn't just that one dialect either.
No, Western Canadian Inuktitut and North Alaskan Inupiatun also scored very highly, so it suggests there really is a concentration of snow-related vocabulary there.
Wow. So not a hoax, perhaps, or at least more complex than that.
It seems the vocabulary is extensive, and it's not just having, say, 10 synonyms for snow. They found specific terms in Eastern Canadian Inuktitut like kikalukpak.
What's that mean?
It describes the sound of noisy walking on hard snow.
Oh, you can almost hear that.
Exactly. It paints such a specific picture. And another one was impiot.
Meaning?
The first snowfall of the season. Again, highlighting a specific important event.
These are really nuanced distinctions, not just snow.
Precisely. Different types, different conditions, different actions related to snow. It points to a deep engagement with that environment.
But wasn't only Inuit languages in the top group for snow, right?
No, that's also important. Other Alaskan languages, Atina, Dena'ina, Central Alaskan Yupik, were also high up, which makes sense geographically.
Similar environments, similar needs, maybe?
Yes, the practical need to distinguish snow types for travel, hunting, safety, that would likely drive vocabulary development.
Okay, but then Japanese and Scots were also in the top 20. That seems a bit more surprising.
It does at first glance, but think about Japan. Snow features significantly in aesthetics, winter activities, even art.
Okay.
And Scots, well, Scotland gets some pretty varied winter weather. Maybe not Arctic levels, but enough for distinctions to matter.
Did they have examples for Scots?
They did, like Doonlay for a heavy fall of snow,
Oh.
Forder for a sudden slight fall of snow,
Hi.
and Footum, which is apparently snow drifting at intervals.
Very specific.
It really underlines the point that it's not just how much snow you get, but how culturally important it is, how people interact with it.
That's a great point. And that actually leads into another interesting finding about rain, right? How the connection with the environment wasn't quite so straightforward.
Yeah, this was fascinating. You'd think the rainiest places would have the most words for rain. Simple.
But it wasn't like
No,
that.
not entirely. The study found languages from South Africa like Nyanja, Eastha, Shona had lots of Rowan words, even though they're in areas with only sort of medium rainfall.
So why would that be?
Well, the researchers suggested it might be about how critical rain is for survival.
Okay. More important than just volume.
Exactly. In many places, rain is absolutely vital for farming, for water. So even if it's not constant, it's something you think about, talk about, maybe worry about a lot, especially its absence.
That makes a lot of sense. If something's crucial but not always there, you develop more ways to discuss it, maybe even rituals around it.
Precisely. And the example from Eastha really shows this. They have a term, labanuba.
Which is?
It's described as an honorific form of address to thunder to bring rain. It's literally talking to the thunder, asking for rain.
Wow, that's powerful. Not just describing, but interacting.
And another one, klaba, refers to a ritual sprinkling of water or urine to bring rain.
Okay, that really drives home the cultural significance. It's tied into belief and practice.
It really highlights how language encodes cultural responses, not just passive observations of the environment.
Fascinating stuff. Now, the study also created a tool, didn't it? So people can explore these connections themselves.
Yes, a way to look up concepts and see the top languages, or look up a language and see its characteristic concepts. It's a great resource for digging deeper.
And they looked beyond just weather, right? Concepts like smell.
They did. Smell, love, ghost. They explored quite a few.
What came out on top for smell? That seems like a really interesting one.
It was a cluster of oceanic languages, particularly Marshallese, scored very highly for smell-related terms.
Marshallese. In the Pacific.
That's right. And apparently this was a bit of a surprise, as smell vocabularies in that region haven't been studied that much.
So what kind of smells do they have specific words for?
Well, they gave examples like jatbo. That's the smell of damp clothing.
Okay, I can imagine that smell.
Then meyeu, the smell of blood. And elel, which is the specific smell of fish lingering on hands, body, or utensils.
That makes so much sense for a culture closely tied to the ocean and fishing.
Exactly. Very specific, very culturally relevant distinctions. It really opens your eyes, or maybe your nose, to linguistic diversity in areas we might overlook.
It makes you wonder what other sensory or abstract concepts have this richness in languages we barely know.
Absolutely. And that tool they built could help uncover more of that.
Now, we should probably add a word of caution here, right? With any big computational study like this.
Oh, definitely. That's crucial. The researchers themselves are very clear about the limitations. These results aren't infallible.
They need checking.
Ideally, yeah.
Yeah.
Checking against original detailed dictionaries is always best if you're doing serious research based on this.
And didn't they have an example where the computer struggled a bit? Plautdeutsch.
Yes, exactly. For Plautdeutsch, a type of Low German, the top concepts the analysis pulled out were really common grammatical words of the and.
Not very insightful.
Right. It just shows how hard it is to perfectly filter out those super frequent function words that appear everywhere. They can kind of skew the counts sometimes.
There was also something about the word counts, including example sentences in the dictionaries.
That's another factor. The counts weren't just definitions, but also words used in definitions and example sentences. They tried to account for common words likely to appear in examples, like man or woman, but some bias could still creep in from that context.
So the big takeaway here, maybe the most important one, is about interpretation. We have to be careful not to jump to conclusions, or worse, reinforce stereotypes based on these lists.
Absolutely critical. Taking these results at face value without understanding the nuances and limitations could be really misleading, even harmful. The concepts listed are, at best, a very crude reflection of a culture associated with a language. Caution and respect are essential.
Okay, so wrapping this up, it really feels like this deep dive confirms that languages do reflect the priorities, the environments, the experiences of their speakers in really fascinating ways.
Definitely. From the richness of snow terms in Inuit languages challenging that old hoax idea,
Mm-hmm.
to the cultural weight of rain, even where it's not constant, and these incredibly specific smell vocabularies in the Pacific.
It really makes you think about English or whatever your own language is, doesn't it? What concepts do we have tons of words for? What does that say about us?
That's a great question for everyone listening to ponder. What seems particularly elaborated in your language? What might that suggest about your culture's history or focus?
Yeah, the fun thought exercise.
Yeah.
And maybe a final thought to leave people with. Thinking about these computational tools,
Mm,
where does this go next?
right.
What other linguistic assumptions might get challenged or confirmed as we analyze language on this massive scale?
Mm-hmm.
What other hidden links between language, culture, and how we experience the world are waiting to be uncovered?
It feels like there's still so much more to learn. We're really just scratching the surface with this kind of analysis.